Welcome. I'm Patricia Oliver, the Dean of the Hines College of Architecture and Design. And I'm honored really to welcome you to the celebration of the life of Joe Mashburn, who was Dean of the Hines College of Architecture from 1998 to 2010. Joe left an indelible imprint on the college. We're richer for the industrial design program that he fought hard for, the only one in a 4-state region. We're grateful for the Keelan Design Exploration Design Lab that we are now so incredibly dependent on. The Community Design Resource Center just there, and the gallery that bears his name to my right. But mostly, we're grateful for his creative energy, his creative spirit that was evident in everything that he did. A mutual friend of ours, upon hearing of Joe's passing, wrote, "Joe was, as you well know, a brilliant designer, a transformative teacher, and an extraordinary colleague." And so we couldn't think of a better way to celebrate Joe's life and his legacy than to have his story told through the memories of some of his friends and colleagues. I want to thank you all for joining us. In front of the gallery, there is, Catherine Essinger has put together some letters from Joe, plans for a home that he and Julia designed, and some college student publications. Over by the theater, there are sketchbooks for guests for you to leave messages and memories or whatever else you would like to say that we could pass on to the Mashburn family. Again, thank you for joining us.
Good evening. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person to person tonight. My immune system is weak and the doctors say I need to avoid crowds. But the technology lets us show up in a virtual way, and I can pay my respects to a good friend and colleague virtually. I have thanks to erstwhile librarian Catherine Essinger, my wife Robin, and Stephen Chad for helping to hook me up so I could do this. It's all quite amazing to me, but it seems simple to them. I hope all of you are inoculated and you're all wearing masks here tonight. Sometime in April, I wrote a letter to Joe when I realized I probably wouldn't be able to see him very much because I was immune compromised from my heart transplant. The letter is a stream of consciousness kind of thing where I clear my head of thoughts about Joe and our time together here at the college. I thought I would like to read it to you. On a rainy day Sunday afternoon. Good afternoon, cowboy. I had a good conversation with Julia a few days ago. I was happy to find her in pretty good spirits and resilient as hell. Good for her and good for you. We both have good marriages. I'm devastated by the news of your condition, but I should know by now how none of us is indestructible. Besides my own precarious ordeals over the years with health problems and being with friends and colleagues like Tom Colbert, Gene Kirchnack, Bill Stern, and Dr. Malcolm Quantrell during their grave illnesses and their untimely passing, I know all too well that we are alive by grace and we have an obligation to make the most of it and to be happy. You certainly did that and more than most, and you've got many, many friends. Many of them are from our generation, and they know things about the world that other generations do not. Your friends would bar the devil at the door for you and a glass of good Scotch whiskey. You are a genuine beauty-seeking Texas highwayman, maybe the purest hybrid I have ever met, a genuine old-style U of H icon, a product of the XYZ buildings, who had been here during the infamous years of the South Coast counterculture. You were here when I came to teach in the early 70s. In those days, you knew the seasons and the genius loci of the college by the industrial smells that blew in from the coffee plant, the slaughterhouse, the refineries of the Gulf, Coast. They did it seasonally. You especially knew that a cold front was coming in when you smelled the coffee. It was a treat to have a native dean, a prodigal son who went off to enjoy and learn from other places, and then came back to reside in a palace Phil Johnson had built for us behind your back while you were away. Rags to riches for us. You maybe should have gone ahead with your threat to paint the interior of the atrium chromium yellow, but instead you painted your retirement office a perfect blue and showed up here in a white continental suit, covering up your drugstore cowboy denim jeans, shirt, and string tie, and silver rodeo buckle. You brought us industrial design and interior design, two elements of the Bauhaus dream that you added to a college built on the idea of a unified design discipline. There were too many good things to think about. I have rich memories of you, including arguments that put us both in fits. But they were resolved easily in minutes because that's what civilized cowboys do. I recall a notable standoff whiskey binge at Nora's apartment after the college Christmas party. Lannis was there, as he always was for our deanships. It solved everything, except for my 3-day headache afterwards. My most and first vivid encounter with you was an all-day session we had moving the high-style, high-tech office furniture out of the room on the 3rd floor to the dean's office so I could move into the 3rd floor corner office with my more comfortable equipment. You took one look at that jazzy office system oozing with designer genetics, and you decided you had to have it. And I always thought it looked like a dentist's office. We were onto something with the Texas-themed studio we did. Some of the buildings students designed were quite extraordinary and pioneered ideas I saw in later work, even continue to. This is so even when you thought the best work was creating beauty, and I thought it was seeking its cancellation. I enjoyed that opportunity to teach with you more than you'll ever know. I still think the best things in a school are the shared opportunities to carry on a critical dialogue with colleagues that you respect and students that you respect. That's it in a nutshell. Here are some passages I picked out just for you of sticky things said better than I could ever say them. The first is from Allen Ginsberg's poem, How. America, when will you be angelic? When will you take off your clothes? When will you look at yourself through the grave? When will you be worthy of your million Trotskyites? America, why are your libraries full of tears? And Terry Eagleton, in his poem After Theory, when I hear that title, it reminds me of your Theories-Free Zone bumper stickers when you first came to town. There is always a risk that education may put you at odds with the tasteless, clueless Philistines who run the world and whose lexicon stretches only to words like golf, power, cheeseburger. And then John Hayek, such places as memory, his encapsulation of the idea of genius loci, rescued from the inscrutable concepts of Norbert Schultz and Martin Heidegger. John Hayek wrote, "The rocking chair is the soul of the porch, remove it, and all you have left is white pine for the carpenter ants. Finally, the loss of even one person can shake everything. People come and tell us we are lost, and they can help us find our way. But we aren't lost. We always live in the space between the coming and going, between the old kingdoms and the new fantasies. And whenever some person or some idea passes, I think of William Butler Yeats and his magnificent poem, The 19th Century and After, where he concludes, though the great song return no more, there's been delight in what we have, the rattle of pebbles on the shore under the receding wave. Best to you, Joe.
I feel like I should be getting ready to read the names for graduation. Did that so many times with sitting in these chairs with Joe, assembled group, a lot of friends and out here today. It's hard to sum up your friendship with a longtime friend. It really is. I was asked to help assemble some music for today's remembrance, and in compiling it, I came across a recurring theme, front porch. A word about the music. The core music is from Lyle Lovett and Robert Earl Keen, two poet-songwriters that were Joe and Julia's neighbors in College Station. Their jointly written song, the Front Porch Song, frames the music today. You may not have heard much of it because we're all visiting, which is important thing today. But Robert Earl Keen's version will be first, and if we haven't heard it, I don't think we have. And then we'll end with Lyle Lovett's version. The first two pieces you probably didn't hear today, but I certainly enjoyed putting this together because I think it'll be a surprise to a lot of Joe's friends. They're by Chopin and Rachmaninoff, and are played by Abby Simon, a longtime U of H faculty member and internationally known pianist. In fact, one of the foremost interpreters of both of those composers. And he was a neighbor in the building and friend of the Mashburns. And the Chopin Nocturne was Joe's ringtone on his phone. It's pretty high quality stuff to be able to get Abby Simons as a friend, the ringtone. The third piece that we heard was from the opera Il Rondine by Puccini. And you might know it from the movie A Room with a View. It's music that Joe and I used in our to introduce students to Tuscany in our first studio in a Tuscan hill town. We wanted the students to be there, not just visit. And this seemed a good way to encourage a front porch approach and mindset to become engrossed in Tuscany. The idea of front porch evokes for me the experience of relaxation, sharing, camaraderie, while simultaneously being a part of and viewing the world. Withdrawing partially to digest and comment on happenings, past, present, and future. Joe and I had some of our best times together during those Italian study abroad days. We would retire after dinner to a bar that had a tiny balcony hanging over the fortification wall, drinking Jack Daniels, drinking Jack Daniels. That's the important part. Watching the town sort of wind down and taking in the Tuscan countryside. It was another kind of front porch experience. We reminisced, planned for future, shared our thoughts on everything from the mundane to the cosmic. In his last months, mostly confined to his bed in his and Julia's sky hut, he loved watching the clouds and sunsets and enjoying front porch moments with a friend or two. Joe, as all his friends know, was passionate about design, all design, but also about living a life well, with meaning. He is gone, but like the ever-widening ripples from a pebble dropped in a pool, his gentle influence is with his friends and students forever.
Thanks, Lannis. Julia and Mars, friends and colleagues, I'm honored to be here to speak with you today about Joe. I've known Joe, then Professor Mashburn to me, since I was an undergraduate student at Texas A&M University. He always had the coolest projects and his studios filled up so fast, I was never able to take him as a student. Nevertheless, I learned a lot from him. Joe was a designer. I designed a house for my parents, named it a very long, skinny house with full respect for the long, skinny house with a kink in it that he and Julia designed. The same house where Mars, as a young child, would walk around with his stick, sounding out the ribs of the corrugated metal siding. I've often used the progressive architecture article to talk about the importance of light from two sides: natural ventilation, simplicity of forms, and humble materials. It seems so simple, yet often gets lost in the search for innovative form. It was at his direct invitation that I came back to the University of Houston to teach here in 2000. As a young faculty member, he often provided guidance and even walked with me across campus to directly support my tenure here. He and I both know that I would not be here without him. In his role as dean, he supported faculty and their teaching missions. One year he sent many faculty, I think it was about 7 of all ranks, to present their scholarship that they had been accepted in a blind peer review process for an ACSA conference in Finland. Andrew, I remember. In 2004, he invited Susan Rogers to teach here and to formalize the work that had begun with David Thaddeus to propose the Community Design Resource Center. Joe supported Susan as she transformed the CDRC over there into a university recognized research center, transformed its work and the communities within which Susan and her staff engaged. Joe and the Green Building Components Grant Program that he developed helped support the start of the Materials Research Collaborative after a graduate student, Bridget Ryan, suggested, we need a materials library here. He was open to good ideas from everyone. The UHGBC grant program financed a number of initiatives from faculty and local professionals, including an electric vehicle charging station, parametric precast concrete systems, and more. Brett Zamore told me recently that the grant gave him the opportunity to focus on ZFAB. And as has been mentioned, perhaps most importantly, he brought to the college 2 new programs. Our industrial design program was based on his belief that design operates at all scales. When he first proposed the program, the faculty were not at all in favor of anything other than our current singular focus in architecture. But he listened to faculty concerns, discussed possibilities, and built a consensus in support of a more interdisciplinary design college. He then hired Unsuk Kwan, who worked with faculty to build an amazing program here. Joe also started our interior architecture program, showing his continued support of design at multiple scales and the importance of interdisciplinary collaborations. In addition to these programs, he established the Burdett Keelan Design Exploration Center, the Green Zone, and the space in between. That facility allows students in all of our programs access to varied methods of making. While he introduced digital fabrication to our college, and I'm sure Joe Meppelink will talk a little bit about that, his support of digital fabrication never overshadowed his belief in craft. So it would be hard to imagine this college without the industrial design program, interior architecture program, Burdett Keelan Center, Community Design Resource Center, or the Materials Resource Collaborative that all support learning for our students. Joe maintained and cultivated relationships with friends and alumni of the college, such as Doug Michaels, Bill Kendall, and Bill Stern, and so many others, and so many of you. And these relationships help bring opportunities to the U of H students and special places like the Allen Room to this campus. Mashburn was also committed to teaching. He truly believed that we must first start with what is best for our students. He taught our freshmen, often filling the theater and this atrium space with rather loud music that was calling students to class, the class where he offered them an introduction to multiple design viewpoints. In the afternoons, Joe could often be found walking through studios with his cup of tea to see what was going on, or frequently participating in design reviews. After retiring as dean, he returned to teach studio, providing provocative questions for his students, balancing encouragement and a demand for rigor. A former student wrote me that Joe had a tremendous impact on how I look at design. What a loss, but such an impact on many lives. And he will continue to impact many more lives. Jeffrey Brune could not be here today, so he asked me to announce the Joe Mashburn Endowed Scholarship for Applied Design. This is intended to have a truly meaningful impact on a student's life. The founding donors are Mars Mashburn, Jeffrey Brown, and Jeffrey Brune. Please consider supporting Joe Mashburn's legacy and continuing his meaningful impact on student lives. Onward.
It's a little bit easier if I stand. I'll probably fall out of the chair. Trying to talk. I don't know if I've ever spoken from a chair, actually. That's probably difficult. Thank you, Lannis and Donna, and thank you everyone here for the honor of speaking about my friend and mentor, Joe Mashburn. I'm going to introduce myself, and I thought a lot about this because today this is not about me, but some of my title has a lot to do with Joe, because I wouldn't have these titles without Joe's belief, trust, and support. But my name is Cord Bowen, and I was faculty here for about 15 years, adjunct faculty, and I was also a student. I did my undergraduate work here. And I know many of you. It's really wonderful to see you all because, you know, this is home. So many good things to say here. Currently, as an introduction, I serve as the chair for the Department of Design at the University of Utah. And I'm a professor there, and my career is really flourished. And again, it's those titles and those names, it really don't mean a lot to me. It's just what I do. It just means I take on more risk, and it's a lot more frustrating. But again, Joe offered space for me to grow and to prove myself. And was also the one that told me that, you know, if you don't leave this place, you'll never really see who you are. So I'll start here. I believe that good teachers and good leaders offer space for you to see yourself. And more importantly, I believe that good leaders and good teachers offer you the space to trust yourself. Think about that for a second. For all that we've memorized, the space to trust and see yourself, because we spend most of our lives in our heads, and we have to make decisions, and we have to believe in ourselves to make those decisions. I think Joe is one of these leaders. I've often said that teaching is a spatial endeavor. I know that we have objectives and rubrics and things that we have to follow to measure ourselves, but ultimately the ones that create the best space for students are the ones that succeed. And Joe did this. As Landis mentioned, traveling in Italy, I got to do this once with Joe and Landis. And, you know, I like to really try to understand and watch the people I work with, and watching Joe walk into spaces, especially sacred spaces or piazzas, his body would change every time. We'd go into tight spaces that were compressed, and you'd watch his shoulders drop, and he would cross his hands in front of him, and he would smile and he would look up. And for, you know, a minute I thought he's observing, but then I realized he was letting go of the space and letting others enjoy it. And then he would go out to a piazza and he'd open his hands wide and say, "Can you believe this?" And he changed his body again to address the space. He taught an introduction to architecture and design course, and that thing would empty out of these doors and spill up to those studios on Wednesdays, where all the foundation faculty would absorb those students. And on those Wednesdays, their brains were like scrambled eggs. And so one day I said, "What is he teaching you in there?" And you're like, "I don't know, man. He turned the lights off for 15 minutes, cranked up some Pink Floyd, and just made us sit there." And I thought, "Oh, that's pretty spectacular." I was like, when you get to my age, you'll realize that's just kind of a form of meditation. I was like, "What'd you think of it?" They're like, "It was scary. We didn't know what to do with ourselves." And then I said, "Well, what else did you do in the class?" And I said, "Well, we stared at a photograph of an Eames chair for 45 minutes. And I said, "Well, tell me about it. What did he talk about?" And they said, "Well, the details, the leather, the wood, the curves." But then they started to float around all of that and say what it felt like to walk into the room and have that piece of furniture there, and how those lines held the room. And I began to understand that 70 to 80% of what Joe would talk about to his students was about experience. It was about space. We don't get to exist in this room without space. This atrium is powerful because of space. Joe taught from that place. It was remarkable to watch him do this in all aspects. As a leader and a dean of this school, he offered all of us space to do our best work. I didn't walk through those doors probably 24,000 times, I think I calculated one time, without ever feeling like my work wasn't important here and that I didn't share that with others here. You don't get to think that by yourself. That has to be set up and it has to be practiced, which leads me to the next point. And Donna mentioned this, the word passion. Everybody knows, you can hear Joe saying it now. He growled when he said it. It's like passion. You know, he had always had that thing. He would stand on the stairs up there and he would say it. One year he had a wand that lit up. I don't know if anybody remembers that. You know, the first few times a new dean says it, you think, wow, okay, that's him. And then after 50, 500, 1,000 times, you start to say, that's us. And that went to the students. Making spatial relationships, talking about passion and really believing in something and reiterating it over and over, it doesn't just affect the faculty and the students, it becomes generational. The kids of our students who have graduated, they carry that with them because he taught them to look at something long enough to understand why it's beautiful and that you have permission to love it for your own reasons. Over and over again. Joe could show up in a room, say exactly the right words, and then back up and watch people fill the space. So I will end here, which is when I moved to Utah, it's a pretty cool job opportunity, honestly. I was terrified. And no one's prepared to take on leadership roles. 3 months into it, I just called Joe. And oddly, we didn't talk about the job. We didn't talk about the work, but 3/4 of the way into the call. And if I was lucky, Julia was close by and he'd put her on speakerphone, because we all know Julia is really good at filling all the details. Joe tells half a story. Julia kind of confirms the story, which is great. But he would always, 3/4 of the way in the call, he would say, "Cord, are you happy? You're not doing it right if you're not happy." He sensed it. 6 months, 3 months later, I'd call him again. We'd talk about random stuff. They'd be in Marfa. I'd get Julia again, which is always wonderful. And then he would always say it again. "Why are you happy?" And I'd say, "I think so." But it was really valuable mentor advice. I got to see Joe a couple of months ago. And once again, he had set up a space, a way to sit from his bed and observe the horizon outside of the windows in their apartment. And I remember halfway through that conversation too, he said, "Man, it's just as long as you're happy." And I think taking away all the passion, the importance, and the idea that I really love that Joe would ask me that question. And I think that he felt that about everybody. So my final words are this. The form of Joe is not here, it's gone. The voice of Joe is not here, it's gone. The amazing style of Joe with the suits is not here, it's gone. But the space he created is here. And we share it. And we get to pass it along. We walk through it. The energy's still in the building. It's in the relationships we have with each other and how we talk about things are influenced by that. And that's a space that I'm happy to live in. And I'm happy to share it with all of you. Thank you.
Hello, friends. Cord, thank you. Donna, Lannis, so well spoken, everybody. First off, to Julia, Mars, and Lori, I'm so sorry for your loss. We're so sorry for your loss. Joe was a wonderful man and a real mentor for me and for, I think, many of us here. I wanted to just say just a couple of brief words about what Joe did for me, for us, Andrew Verana, my partner. He, in one of his very grand experiments, and this is a way of him giving space, as Cord says, and Andrew went to him and said, "I'd like to teach a class called digital fabrication." Andrew was fresh out of Columbia. He had this idea that computers and computer-controlled manufacturing could make interesting things in the service of architecture. And I don't know exactly what Joe told him, but the way I heard it from Andrew and the way I heard it from Mashburn later on was, "Okay, fine, but you need to teach it with this guy being me." And so he kind of slammed us together, and it's been a great experiment. And my dear friend Andrew, and business partner still, and teaching colleague for almost 10 years here at U of H, through all those interesting, wonderful projects that he gave us the time and the space and the resources to realize. We're truly grateful for that. It's made us who we are, and we're so thankful for that. I wanted to talk a little bit about another experience that Andrew and I shared with Joe over the years here. This is something that many of you probably know, and I don't know what this class was called. Through those four doors, as the leader of this institution, he saw fit to intercept all of these fresh faces coming in here, all the freshmen, and he taught a freshman design seminar. Do you know what that class was called? Intro to Design. It was Intro to Design. And about design, Joe would excitedly say about this college, "We design everything from salt shakers to cities." Remember that? I mean, what a great, what a great way to put it. And so he taught these kids, and this class met, I don't know, once or twice a week, once a week. That's right. And it started at 8, or was it 9? Was it 1? Oh, I thought my memory was early in the morning. Anyway, I swear it was early. Andrew, was it early? Tell me it was early. Okay. It felt early. Varied did. The times anyway, he asked us to give a lecture to this class, and he had guest lecturers every so often. That was a real honor for Andrew and I to be a part of that. It felt like he trusted us with a little sliver of his big responsibility to impress upon everybody the journey they were about to undertake here. And this class was for industrial design, interior, and architecture students. It was all incoming freshmen. He began the class every morning, I'm going to say the same way. Everybody got into the class. Those 4 doors closed at whatever time that was. Cell phones off, and everybody sat quietly. And then Joe would play a song. And I don't remember what song he played while we were there. We probably lectured there 3 or 4 times. He would play Bob Dylan or Bruce Springsteen or his old buddies Lyle Lovett or Robert Keane from the porch days that Lannis mentioned. And but primarily folk songs. And I'm not a folk music aficionado. But those songs they were poetic, and they spoke to their place in time in history. And Joe he wasn't didactic about that. He played the songs. Everybody listened quietly, and there was no explanation. He didn't dissect the lyrics. He didn't hit you over the head with it. He gave those students the time and space to listen carefully, to place themselves in their own time and their own place in the city that we work in here. And Andrew and I sat there like students with our cell phones off, and we listened. He did not break that routine for us or for anybody. That was a really important way for him to start the class, and it set a tone, and just an incredible and beautiful tone. And I'm sure that space and that moment that he gave to all those students and to us left a real lasting impression. The title of the lecture that Andrew and I gave at that class, and we tweaked it every year because that meant a lot to us to come there and talk to his students. The title of our lecture was Only in Houston. And it was, I think we've referred to it at times as kind of our love letter to this city. Part of the reason we named the lecture that is, again, because of Joe and the way that he felt about this city. And I'm sure some of you have heard Joe say this too, the way he described not just the college, but the university. He would excitedly say, "This is the University of Houston." You know, he was proud. He was so proud of the fact that our student body was made up of a diverse group of wonderful young men and women of all races, ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic status, age. It was truly a cross-section of this city, and that meant a lot to him. And he knew that this city could do a lot, and that's what we've found too. I think we all know that. And so again, I want to close by just expressing real gratitude for Mashburn for what he did for us and what he did for so many students. And I just wanted to offer that little window into his world and how he taught and what that meant for us and for all those kids. Thank you.
I met Joy and Julia in 1977 in Fayetteville, Texas. Clovis Heimsath had moved his architectural practice to the country. I came with the offer of free studio space and a chance to produce architectural ceramics. Joe came after answering an ad posted on the architecture department bulletin board. No one from Heimsath's office in Houston had moved with them to Fayetteville. I had some drafting experience and was working for $5 an hour. I can't imagine Joe was making much more than that. The Mashburns came out on Friday with their brand new baby boy, Mars. Joe worked late into the evening on Fridays and then all day on Saturday. The Heimsaths had been running a small restaurant called The Country Place in the old hotel they owned. When they moved their practice, they came to the conclusion that it was just too much to do. Julia remembers it, that she came across the street, stopped me on the corner and said, "We should run the restaurant." I wasn't so convinced we could, but within a week we were cooking and taking reservations. Joe and my then husband, Roger Lister, were the waiters. We ran the Country Place for 2 years. I realize now we were ahead of our time with the farm to table stuff, serving homemade cottage cheese, freshly made breads, 2 new entrees each week, and always a buttermilk pie. We got written up in Texas Monthly, and we had really good leftovers through some tough times. Then my waiter divorced me, and Joe and Julia came back to Houston for Joe to finish school, get accredited, and take a teaching job. That led to their journey from University of Houston to Texas A&M, then Virginia Tech, then Australia, back to Virginia Tech, and then back to Houston. And as they say, the rest is history. Joe loved Indian food, a good martini, Armani suits, old blue jeans, new cars, old trucks, Texas music, and dogs. His dog of choice was a pug. First Slug, then a series of Domino, Walrus, Zephyr, and the classy Matisse. So who would have guessed he would fall in love with the chocolate brown miniature poodle named Mick Jagger? He was the therapy dog to all of us who saw Joe these last few months, and a constant comfort for him to the end. Joe loved his family, and I made myself part of it. I was basically the extra kid, the crazy aunt, and the alternative nanny to Mars, taking many family vacations and spending any extra time I had in the comfort of their many homes. Joe was one of the few people who, when I said I was going to be an artist, he told me he knew I would do it. That singular confidence was empowering for me. It is that kind of support and confidence that I know you all have experienced as his students and fellow faculty members. Joe grew up in a family of 3 brothers, all of them tinkerers and car buffs. Joe shared those interests with his own son. With a degree in industrial design, Mars has grown up to be a remarkable designer, holds several patents, and is vice president and director of product development for Tramontina, an international company that manufactures cookware, cutlery, and houseware products. I take some credit because he crawled around on that floor of that restaurant at eye level to lots of pots and pans. Your dad was incredibly proud of you. The only complaint I ever heard was that you worked too hard. Then came sweet Lori. Lori was a 3rd-year architecture student of Joe's at Virginia Tech and had a fortuitous encounter with Mars at an art supply store that has led to 20 years of love. A successful architect who has worked for Gensler, Shepley Bullfinch, and now is special projects architect for the Houston Zoo. Lori is currently God's gift to the Atwater Prairie Chicken. Joe thought you worked too hard too, but that's not a bad thing. Joe loved Julia. And I will take this opportunity while I'm here at the podium to say, Joe Mashburn would not have been the dean you all know and love without Julia. It was always Joe and Julia. Julia nurtured, dressed, fed, and sometimes kicked him in the butt to get him where he was. I saw them design the long skinny house together, first seeing it sketched on a napkin, paper napkin at Orsak's Cafe. The last house they did together, I can literally climb a fence and walk across a pasture to reach the front door. The clean, well-lighted space was a stark contrast to my cluttered 125-year-old farmhouse. I found good conversation, a safe haven, and a fantastic front porch to watch a Central Texas storm roll in. Joe loved to make statements in the classroom, faculty meeting, or his own homes, and sometimes you got them as gifts, a reminder to be mindful. If you were really lucky, you got one of these custom-made t-shirts, Beauty Before Death. That's something to think about, and it's a pretty profound statement now. Pancreatic cancer is a terrible disease, but Joe took this journey on his own terms, in his own home with friends and family and dog around him. I'd like to personally thank the two Jeffreys. Jeffrey Broom came every day to visit with Joe and brought a sensibility to those visits, and we know a whole lot more about Yoshio Taniguchi. Jeffrey Brown's visits produced an energy level many days no one had. He could regale us with a joke and then bring the hardest discussion about death and dying. Julia gave Joe the ultimate gift to make him comfortable and peaceful and have a damn good time. He did it with dignity, grace, and a sense of humor that was remarkable. I was honored to be on that journey with Joe. Godspeed, Joe Mashburn, and onward.
This college has always been and remains a design school. Here we're committed to design as the fundamental means of our discipline, as a way of knowing, and as a means to enrich and improve life. We know that in an information age, ideas are the commodity, and design is making ideas matter.
My full name is Joseph Lang Mashburn. Lang, L-A-I-N-G. I was named for a man who was killed in the Second World War. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. Moved to Dallas at age 4, and then moved to Houston at about age 10. My father had studied engineering, and he wanted me to be a civil engineer, and so I obeyed essentially. When I went to college, I didn't. So I first started in engineering, and I had the good fortune to be in the architecture movement taking this would be geometry class, and I saw the students, the architecture students, were walking in with these model bridges, and they had to span a meter and support a brick and use toothpicks or matchsticks. I forgot. Yeah, but anyway, the point was that I thought that's what I would be doing. And meanwhile, I was taking all this trigonometry. So I hated it. So I went to see a counselor, and she said, "Well, you've made A's in art all your life, and you failed physics in high school. What are you doing in engineering?" I said, "Well," she said, "try architecture." So I mean, it was just kind of like, really. And but when I got there, I felt it was just nothing. It was like nothing I had experienced in my life. All the values just completely shifted. The things that I really enjoyed and thought were as opposed to high school, the first year of college. Saying, when I was in school, our heroes were architects. And I talked to my freshmen a lot, and we had a lot of help in that class because they're all really great examples of people that are doing really exciting stuff. And they never even imagined that they'd be doing that with an architecture. And we try to have some of those people come through. And part of that happenstance, and serendipity is wonderful. But I think you've got to be open to it and not shut it out with this sort of mindset that no, this is what I'm doing. I've got to take this for mine. You don't have to do Instead of make more fun if you don't, have more fun if you don't. Get more trouble.